Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Vikings Spin. I'm your host, Jason, and we are back now as we head into the 2018 offseason. It's our first show since the Vikings' heartbreaking loss to the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. But we are back, re-energized, and we've been following all of the rumors here in free agency and with the NFL Combine coming up, and of course, I've got my guy, Ryan Bianconi, back on with me. Ryan, say hello.
Well, hello there, and happy Friday Eve, Jason.
All right. Well, yeah, let's get to it here. The Vikings free agency. Of course, there's the big elephant in the room, which is the quarterback situation. Before we tackle that, I just want to go over two little mini headlines here for some team news. Looks like the Vikings tendered Anthony Harris and Matt Brown. Both of those guys are expected to sign their tenders. Of course, Harris, the third safety and spot starter for the Vikings. I'm happy about that one, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely important to have the depth there. And Matt Brown is going to be brought into the running back room to compete, at least in training camp here. So, but yeah,
that's a running back. Would you say he is, Jason?
Well, he didn't really get too much of a chance last year. I think he only appeared in one game. But he was in the mix for the Redskins, before coming over to the Vikings. He was in the mix in their running back room. So.
Does he have any kind of scat back abilities like McKinnon? Because it looks more and more, in my personal opinion, I think we've seen the last of Jared McKinnon.
Well, yeah, I think Jared McKinnon. For sure wants to have a bigger role, on a team. He took a lot of snaps last year with Dalvin Cook going down, but still shared the load with Latavius Murray. I think the Vikings see McKinnon as a backup and as a scat back, and maybe McKinnon sees himself as more. But
have you ever heard, like when you watch some of the videos on Vikings.com, especially B-Rob's 99 Questions, have you ever seen how the other guys love impersonating Jared?
Oh yeah, they mock the high voice and everything.
Yeah, that gets me every time where they'll say, "Oh yeah, man, I think it's Jared," because he's all, "Hey coach, you see what I did on the field today?" It's always like that. I don't know. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, no, those are definitely entertaining, and it was funny the way they would rhythm about that. But part of me I think would be sad to see him go because he did a lot of good things, but I understand. They made an investment in Dalvin Cook. With the in the draft last year, he was the Vikings' top pick. In the 4 games that he played, he was very explosive and looks like a game breaker. And
yes.
And then they did make a financial investment too in Latavius Murray, and Murray started to carry more of a load towards the end of last season. He was definitely the guy in the red zone.
I thought Murray deserved that load, that responsibility as well. Watching Jared, his game is clearly change of pace. There's a lot of fans that like to compare him to Darren Sproles. I think there is some viability to that comparison. But we were talking about kind of predicting and that he won't be on the roster next year, and to take that prediction one step further, it echoes a lot of, if you remember a few years ago when we had Toby Gerhardt, that was Adrian Peterson's backup, and we were hoping for him to be kind of the Mike can't remember if we let Gearhart walk and didn't bother making him an offer, or if he just opted to be out of here. But the bottom line is he went to Jacksonville that really didn't have much competition at running back, and he couldn't take the starting spot down there. And I think, I think much like Toby Gearhart, Jerick McKinnon's going to learn the hard way. He's not a feature back.
Well, this has been happening as of late with players that are leaving the Vikings, even players that may have been featured players like Adrian Peterson. There were a contingent of fans that thought the Vikings would pay for not bringing Adrian Peterson back last season, and that was clearly wrong. I think that maybe with the exception of 1 or 2 games, he did show that he's probably past his prime last season. Getting traded, the Saints signing him and then trading him several weeks later.
And then not only that, but if I'm not mistaken, either the Cardinals have released AP, or they are planning to, or have a plan in place to release him come the new league year. So if you go through 2, technically 3 teams in just, 12 months, you might not be as valuable as you think. Right,
absolutely. And, like you said, McKinnon, he's got some quality attributes, but you may find out, in the market that he's not going to get a huge mega deal to be someone's featured back. They probably would want him in a similar role that the Vikings had him in.
Not only that, but running backs are kind of the low premium right now, because even though we've seen an influx of first-round running backs again, Alvin Kamara was a 4th-round pick last year, and I think Hunt was Kareem Hunt was, I think, even a 5th-round pick. And these are guys that are starting and playing very well right away. So if you think about it, McKinnon he's looking for maybe better dollars or a bigger role. There's no telling that some GM doesn't already have an eye on a certain guy, maybe in the ACC or in the SEC or the Big Ten or something that's toting the rock and going out and is probably going to flourish as a pro. So he's kind of, if you think about it, it's smart of him to test the market a little bit and to get and look for what he wants. But the running back position just right now, where they're actually finding a lot of these young guys that can contribute right away. So he's kind of sort of playing with fire and maybe even heartbreak.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that turns out for him. If he does move on, I certainly wish him luck, except when he's playing the Vikings. But yeah, we'll go. This Vikings free agency. I'm just gonna quickly go through the list of free agents, and then we'll dive into the cap space figures and some other possibilities. But
okay.
The major players left here. So the Vikings have taken care of the exclusive rights free agency, where they announced their intentions with Harrison Brown. They announced that they're not going to bring back Jeff Overbaugh, who was the long snapper who filled in for Kevin McDermott in the playoffs. So it sounds like they're going to stick with McDermott. Then we have restricted free agents in Nick Easton and Jeremiah Searles. The Vikings announced earlier, I think it was last week, that they do not intend to place a tender on Searles, so he may not be in the team's plans for 2018.
That's interesting. That's interesting, because I think he's a pretty good backup, a pretty good depth guy. So maybe they're trying to go younger there.
Yeah, could be, or maybe they think the tender value, the original round tender on Searles is $1.9 million.
Okay, that makes sense.
So they may still want to bring him back, but maybe at a lower price. We don't know. The other restricted free agent to keep an eye on is starting left guard Nick Easton. Now a second round tender would come at $2.9 million. The original round tender, since Nick Easton wasn't drafted, would be 1.9. But the problem with that is the Vikings would get no compensation if somebody signed them to an offer sheet and left. So they may want to just work out a regular contract with Nick. But I would expect the Vikings to have interest in bringing Nick Easton back. He was a starter last year. Was a spot starter the year before, and I think he showed a lot of improvement. He's young, and since he's only had 1 year as a starter, he still probably come fairly inexpensively if they can get him on, maybe a 2 or 3 year contract now. The other, that wraps up the restricted free agents. I don't know, what are your thoughts on Easton?
I thought he did well this year. I'd like to see us bring him back in some sort of capacity. It was kind of neat where at the beginning of the offseason you saw Alex Boone still get the snaps at left guard. But it was funny how our passing game looked completely pedestrian when Boone was out there, and then when you put in Pat Elflein at center instead of Nick Easton, and then allowing Nick Easton to go to left guard, just the offensive line improved like tenfold, I thought. He certainly had some blunders, he certainly had some rough games, but with the amount of starter experience he has, even if you plan on trying to upgrade the position, whether it's going after a Justin Pugh or an Andrew Norwell, or drafting a Billy Price, or trying to get up for that Quentin, what's his name?
Oh, Nelson.
Nelson,
yeah.
I think he's worth bringing back. I don't quite know the ins and outs of what his status is as far as what kind of free agent he is, but I'd like to see him come back.
Yeah, no, I agree. Whether it says, I think he can be a starter, or if they upgrade, he can be depth. But I would definitely be interested if I was Rick Spielman. On the other side, there's 3 Vikings free agents, not quarterbacks. We'll get to those guys, but non-quarterbacks who there was speculation that all 3 of them could retire, or all 3 of them could not retire. So those guys are Terrence Newman, Brian Robinson, and Joe Berger. Now Berger has announced his intentions to play in 2018.
He did? When did he do that?
I saw that come out a couple weeks ago. Didn't get a lot of headlines, but he does plan to play. He would be the oldest player on the Vikings offensive line, obviously, just as he was last year. I thought Berger played well. He's been consistent the last couple of years. But do you think that he's getting up there in age and he might hit a wall this year?
I do actually, and I think even though he did play pretty well last year, and he was never really, I thought, the focal point of any breakdowns or anything.
Right.
But I would like to see him come back in a reserve role, and then maybe either we use one of our draft picks. You and I have talked about at length about trying to get Billy Price, and either having him start there, and then maybe signing a free agent left guard, or even moving Remmers there if we should do something different with tackle spots. But I'd still like to see him come back, though. He's a good stabilizing presence. He knows the system. He knows the coaching. He knows what Sperano wants, and I think he might be a good building block as to how DeFilippo's going to kind of redo the run game with that offense. So I'd like to see him back as well. I think he's probably the one that'll be allowed to kind of go, if that makes sense. I think B-Rob and Terrence Newman will be back.
Yeah, Berger is he's 35 now, and he's going to turn 36 on May 25th. So definitely getting up there in years. Yeah, Newman, we haven't really heard anything in terms of news if he's whether it's going to be one way or the other. Although he did sort of indicate, that last year that why not come back for another shot. And I think this was even, regardless if he won the Super Bowl or not. I know that that's Newman's objective, is to go out on top. And but then he even talked about, even if this was towards the end of last year, even if we won the Super Bowl, maybe I'd come back and try to defend it. So I wouldn't rule him out just yet. Whether he comes back as a cornerback or a safety would be interesting to see. Because I felt in the beginning of the year and even, towards the middle of the season, he was still playing pretty effectively. But then in later in the year, especially in the playoffs, and really so in the Philadelphia game, it seemed like he kind of started to break down a little bit.
Yes, I agree with that.
So Terrence Newman, he's knocking on the door for 40 years old. If he does come back, maybe they put him at safety. In sub packages, but then you've got. Go ahead.
A couple years ago he started at safety when everybody was hurt against Arizona, and I thought he did a phenomenal job there, all things considered. So he does have some familiarity. He knows Zimmer's system extremely well. I don't think he's against moving to safety, but I'd also like to see him on very reduced snap counts.
Yeah, no, I agree. And he's also got a future in coaching, so you never know about that, too.
Right.
And now we get to B-Rod. I haven't seen anything concrete, just rumors. There's so many rumors, of course, at this time of the year, but that the Vikings did not plan on bringing him back. There was speculation at the end of last year, the way things ended, that Robinson was hoping to ride off in the sunset with a Super Bowl win. He seemed pretty dejected after the loss in the NFC Championship game, but he did redo his deal a couple years back to remain a Viking, and his goal is to retire a Viking. So, if this is the end, would he be just retiring, or would the Vikings actually release him, even if he wanted to come back? I don't know.
That's a great question.
We're talking we're talking 3.5 million cap hit.
If we release him?
Yeah, they would save $3.5 million.
Oh, okay. You could save. Okay, I thought it would cost us that.
No.
I'd rather see him out there. I really would. I mean, Daniil still looked like he was trying to get acclimated to the new responsibilities, the new snap counts, trying to get used to the run. He's another one, kind of like what we talked about with Berger on the offensive line. Just B-Rob's been there so long. I think, isn't he the longest tenured Viking now?
Yeah, he would be. So I know he's the only one from the 2019 that went to the previous NFC Championship game.
Right, and I believe he would have been on the. I think he was drafted either 07 or 08, something like that. And I don't know. I'd rather see him one more year, just given that good work and being that good presence in the locker room.
Yeah, it's always good, to have a plethora of defensive ends. He's versatile. He's able to slide inside the defensive tackle. You and I have talked about the Philly formula, where they were even deeper at defensive end. They were 4 deep last year, and that really wears you out on your on the opposing team's offensive line. So, but we'll have to see what happens with that. Now, the other free agents the Vikings have coming up that are not quarterbacks that I could see them resigning to low-cost, short-term deals would be Kai Forbath, Marcus Sherrills, Shamar Stephen, Tom Johnson. Those I think the Vikings, those are the guys I think they'd have interest in. There also, we have Tremaine Brock and Michael Floyd, but I'm not sure that those guys would be in the team's plans going forward. Both of them kind of underwhelmed last year. But, those would be the Vikings free agents. I think Forbath played well enough to warrant bringing back. I think he made some clutch kicks in the playoffs, kept us alive in the Saints game. You'd like to see him a little bit more consistent on extra points. Part of that, though, I can't really pin all on him because there were a few mishaps during the season with the snap or the hold. But overall, I think he was consistent enough. He would be affordable for the Vikings. I think Marcus Sherrills is a nice player to have, as a punt returner that can also handle kick return duties as well on special teams.
Yes,
so.
very good special team. Very good.
Yeah. And then you've got the two defensive tackle free agents. Two different kinds of players. You got Shamar Stephen, who's a little bit more of a nose tackle or run stuffing 3-tech if you use him that way. And then Tom Johnson, who took on a bigger role last year as a starter. Before that, was previously used in the nickel and dime packages as a inside rusher. And I think that's where the Vikings want to put him back to. Zimmer mentioned that he'd like to see him back, but he'd like to reduce his snap counts greatly.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, but we'll see how the market plays out there. And then three of the four elephants in the room are quarterbacks that were Vikings quarterbacks. There's another quarterback who we'll name later, who's also an elephant in the room. But the three guys that are free agents, of course, Case Keenum, Sam Bradford, and Teddy Bridgewater, all unrestricted free agents. In the end, Teddy Bridgewater's contract did not toll, so he will hit the market officially on March 14th. He can negotiate with other teams as early as March 12th. Case Keenum did not get the franchise tag. He did not get the transition tag, and he will also enter free agency as well as Sam Bradford. Let's get your thoughts on these three, and then we'll talk about the fourth guy.
Okay, sounds great. Should we start with the one who smiles?
Yes, let's talk about that one.
Okay, so in my humblest of opinions, I think Teddy Bridgewater is done as a Viking. The Teddy faction of the fan base will tell you that it was no big deal that the Vikings activated Sam Bradford off the injured reserve list to become the backup for the playoffs. But I think that was a strike to Teddy's ego. I'm sure Teddy's aware that he's held in regard as this clutch quarterback, and he thinks that's part of his game, so it doesn't get much more clutch than the playoffs. Certainly doesn't get much more clutch than the NFC Championship game. And if you watch Teddy's exit interview, his body language, his tone of voice, it all suggests he wants a change of scenery. I don't think there's any offer that the Vikings could make him that would be palpable, of course. No one's going to offer Teddy $25 million a year. If somebody did, I think he'd jump on that faster than his mother started up the big Cadillac when he first got that Uber. So I think he's done as a Viking. I think my prediction's been for a long time that he'll go to Miami to try to beat out Ryan Tannehill for that starting spot. It'll pair him with a good offensive-minded coach. The flip side of that, though, is I don't know if Miami's going to want to have two quarterbacks with knee issues. You've mentioned Buffalo quite a bit. I think that's a viable place for him to go, even though it's looking more and more like they're going to keep Tyrod and they're going to draft probably that Josh Allen or Baker Mayfield. And the other spot I've heard for him is Carolina, so he can back up Cam Newton and then get paired with Norm Turner and Scott Turner again.
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation out there. I've heard those reports that you mentioned, and then a couple other I've heard is, Pat Shurmur is, of course, familiar with him and is familiar with his physical condition, too, that maybe he might be a veteran backup for Eli Manning, regardless if they draft a quarterback or not. Or Nate Burleson on Good Morning Football said that he wanted to see Teddy go and back up Carson Wentz, which could allow the Eagles to trade Nick Foles if they so desire to do that. I've heard they've gotten an offer for him.
Okay, so while that's a great idea on paper, let's not forget Carson Wentz has an issue now too, and there's some heavy rumors that Carson Wentz is not going to be ready week 1. So what do you do?
Right. Oh no, absolutely. I mean, and the other thing I heard about that was that there was a rumor some AFC team offered them a second-round pick, and then the Eagles came back and said that we're not going to trade Foles for anything less than a first. So sounds to me, like you said, that they don't want to let him go, and it might be because Carson Wentz is not going to be ready, and the Eagles not comfortable letting Foles go yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going on.
How about Case Keenum? What are your thoughts there?
I also think Case is done as a Viking because whoever is going to lose the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes, excluding ourselves, they're gonna overpay for Case Keenum, and I think he's gonna. I keep feeling like he's gonna end up in Denver because even though there's a report that came out just now that the Broncos are gonna trade Aqib Talib, which is gonna free up a lot of cap space. So I think they're gonna try to make one last hurrah at Kirk Cousins, but that'll still open up some more money so they can overpay for Case Keenum. And I don't think Mike Zimmer holds Case Keenum in such a high regard that Rick would go ahead and unload the bankroll to give him 20-21 million a year. Yeah,
no, I got that impression as well. Even as the Vikings were advancing, last year into the playoffs and stuff, he never really fully endorsed Keenum. Talked about Bridgewater before the Redskins game. Then talked about Bradford's accuracy. As it got closer to the playoffs, and then ultimately activated Bradford in the playoffs, and apparently thought about. And of course these are rumors, but I guess he thought about putting him in the second half of the NFC Championship. But for whatever reasons, it just wasn't a ringing endorsement. I guess he's not comfortable in thinking that Keenum is the guy that he was last year. Thinks he might have been helped out by a little luck, a little bit of surrounding cast, and I can understand because you're talking about and Keenum's market value is over $20 million a year now, according to multiple websites. So you may not be comfortable getting that to a guy that previous to last year hadn't really shown anything other than being a journeyman backup quarterback. So
right.
But, like you said, Denver, and whoever misses out on the Cousins sweepstakes could swoop in, and, Keenum is in a nice position to get himself a big chunk of money in free agency.
Yep, and I keep thinking of Denver because their offensive line isn't that great. Keenum's got great wheels. His arm talent as far as strength goes is okay. He's not terrible. He's not necessarily a noodle. He can get the ball downfield when he needs to. And in Denver, you kind of need a stronger arm to get through those winds,
Right.
Especially in the wintertime. But he may fit there because of the mobility and then the defense is pretty darn good. Even if they got rid of Talib, they're still pretty stout. They can get after the quarterback. So.
Yeah, and Case can probably take care of the ball a little bit better than Osweiler, Simeon, Lynch combination that they tried it out last year. And now that brings us to Bradford, and we've heard rumors swirling around there. With Ian Rappaport that Bradford was the most likely of the three Vikings quarterbacks to resign. What are your thoughts on Bradford?
Well, I'm a big proponent of Bradford just simply on the skill level. I mean, you watch him play ball, he can make all the throws. He does have a reputation for being a statue in the pocket. There is some merit to that. But if you watch the highlights, especially as the year went on in 2016, and if you watch him play against the Dirty Saints in that opener, he's moving all over the place, and he wasn't slow. You know what I mean? He's not Michael Vick by any means, but he's certainly not Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning had almost no speed at all.
Right.
So I like the ploy there because with Sam, you know that what you're going to do is you're going to build toward the future while still being able to win now. He's got a great rapport with Dylan and Diggs and even Rudolph. And really, I think when it comes to out-and-out ability to throw the football, I think he's got a better arm than Cousins, and I think he takes care of the ball a lot better than Cousins does. So, I would say if we end up with him, it's going to be a good thing because you know that they're going to maybe sign him to a 2-year, 3-year deal, something like that. Maybe draft a quarterback. We're all really high on that Kyle Sloter, so maybe Sloter's the future. It'll be some kind of a scenario with that. So even though it may disappoint the fan base having Sam Bradford one more year and then think, he's not going to last a year. Well, there's a plan in place while we're still winning. So
yeah, just to delve into that a little bit more, of course, we know about the knee issues. We know about the issue that he had last year. He did have cleanup surgery on the knee, got rid of the bone spurs and scar tissue that was the source of the pain. And he was able to come back and be active in the 2 playoff games. So he was ready to go. His videos looked good that I saw of him in practice moving around. It was night and day from the Chicago game. So, and then apparently he went skiing last week, according to Mike Zimmer. So, maybe he's feeling better.
You can't exactly ski on one leg. So
right. And of course, you're going to have a contingency plan in place if you do resign him. I've been throwing this out there in a lot of my mock-off seasons. You've seen my mock-off seasons where we have different scenarios for the Vikings. But one common thread that I've had in pretty much every scenario, despite who the starting quarterback is Josh McCown as the backup quarterback, who has a history with DiFilippo and was very effective last year as a Jets starter, but is obviously not their future.
Right. Yeah, and I like that too because he's been around the league so long, and believe it or not, he's not bad for when it comes to being a backup that can win. He's not bad at all with that. So I think he'd be a great guy to have on the team. We're still, we got our young guys becoming vets now, but we're still a relatively young team. And if, say, we draft another quarterback, either late in the first round or maybe in the mid rounds or something to develop into the future guy, him to follow as to what it is being a professional, being a team player, and just showing up to work every day and working on the craft. I mean, that's what Josh McCown is. He's a professional personified.
Absolutely. Now the grand elephant, the fourth elephant. He's not in our room yet, but he could be very soon, and that's Kirk Cousins. Now, Ryan, we've heard a couple of different rumors, of course, on these offers. I'm just going to describe what we've seen. I'm not endorsing these or saying that these are 100% accurate, but
Okay.
We knew that it was going to be the $30 million average range, and then we saw reports that Cousins wanted something shorter term, maybe like 3 years or 4 years, as opposed to 5 or 6. And the first one that I saw come out was a creative one, which had $42 million in year 1, $20 million in year 2, and 29 in year 3. And the thinking behind that was, of course, we know the Vikings have some core players coming up for extensions: Anthony Barr, Stephon Diggs, Eric Kendricks, Danielle Hunter. And the thinking behind the front loading was, we know the Jets have like $94 million in the cap. We figured that they might ridiculously front load Cousins to try to get him to sign there. And if we were to do that, we would take care of the front loading part of it, but then the next year it'd only be $20 million, and then we could afford to give guys like Diggs and Kendricks the lion's share of their extension money in that year 2. But you don't know if the player is all right with that. Maybe they want their money now. And then another one came out, 4 years at an average of $26.5 million a year. So instead of having these numbers that are just miles apart from year to year, 42, 20, 29, you just have this consistent 26.5. And we looked at overthecap.com, and I made some mock off seasons work where the Vikings were able to extend. I did extensions. I did these mock extensions with Diggs and Barr and Kendricks, and the Vikings were able to sign Cousins, sign a backup like McCown for his market value, and a few other minor re-signings and a free agent nickel cornerback like Patrick Robinson with his market value. That was one of the several mock plans I put out, and they were able to do it at that figure, but it was a heck of a lot easier to do it with, say, signing Sam Bradford at $15 million a year. Then you could go after somebody like Nate Solder in free agency. You can get a little bit more aggressive in bringing in outside guys.
I almost think that if you do make it Sam, then you pretty much have to sign a Nate Solder and shuffle him over to the right side. Because as we saw Rashad Hill later in the year, we found that he's pretty good as a backup tackle, but he doesn't do so hot against those speed rushers. And you bring in a guy like Solder, where Riley Reed is already playing well at left tackle. That may be just what Sam Bradford needs to be clean in the pocket.
Absolutely, and with because we saw even early in the year before Remmers went through his bout of injuries, Remmers was holding up pretty well at right tackle. Remmers also played well at guard when Easton went down, but that did force Hill onto the field where he got exposed a bit. But you're right, having two solid tackles, would be amazing. And a guy like Solder would definitely bring, the prescription for the opponent's speed rusher on that side. So,
have we heard why the Patriots aren't re-signing Solder?
I think they may have other priorities, and we'll just pop here on their cap situation. Take a look at where they are.
But he was the starting left tackle for Ravens blindside, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I don't understand why you get rid of somebody like that.
Well, they've only got $20 million under the cap as we speak. The Vikings, and I'll get back to that, they're at $47 million as we speak. But the Patriots, they'd like to bring back Dion Lewis. They also have some other free agents. Danny Amendola is a free agent. Malcolm Butler, though I don't know if they're going to bring him back or not. Rex Burkhead. So they have some other holes there that need filling, and Solder in a tackle market right now, he's the top rated tackle, and it's a very thin tackle free agent class. So if they've only got $20 million and they have to spend 12 or 13 of it on Nate Solder, that doesn't leave you too much room to do much of anything else.
Would you say that maybe they move Reef to right tackle? If
they were to sign,
put Solder left.
If the Vikings were to sign Solder, they could try it. Just see. I'm sure they'd probably try both guys at both spots to see what's more comfortable. But
who was rated higher as a tackle last year? Because I thought Reef had a damn good year.
Reef was excellent. He was definitely the Vikings' top-rated lineman. So they may not want to mess with that. It's just But I think if you. The way I look at it sometimes, and this may be a narrow way to look at it, but I think if you can play the left, you can play the right. If you can play the right, it doesn't necessarily mean you can play the left.
I agree with that, yeah.
So if Solder is a left tackle, he can probably be our right tackle.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That is a good point.
And maybe that's the thinking. I know Paul Allen's a big proponent of Nate Solder. He mentioned him a few times, and I definitely understand why. But it definitely changes things. It changes your outlook in free agency. It's just a domino effect on the cap, because if you look at the Vikings cap right now, it's $47 million. You're going to have some obvious releases coming up. Sharif Floyd being the most obvious, and that's a $6.7 million savings. Maybe right now what would be the practice squad is over the 10-man limit, so there'd be a couple more releases that would get you to, between Floyd and that, would get you to about $55 million. And if you restructure, a couple of candidates would be Latavius Murray and Jarius Wright. And they really wouldn't be shaving off a ton of money, but that would get you another $4 million between those two restructuring. So then you're at $59 million. If the rumor is true about B-Rob, then you're at $62.5 million headed into free agency. So, yeah. The Vikings, I think they're 9th or 10th as it is right now in cap space, so they're in a very good position to do something.
Right. So then now the question with Beckett, especially with Denver doing this thing where they're going to trade Talib, and I felt for a while now that the Jets are going to do their best to try to lure him away and overpay for him. Where does that leave the situation that you think that those two teams can somehow manage to outbid our guys?
Well, let's take a look right now. I'm on the overthecap.com website. I love this website. I've been playing on it now for the last 6 weeks, basically. And so if they are to, let's see if there's any difference in cut or trade. No? Okay. So whether they cut or trade Akeem Talib, they're going to gain $11 million in cap space. His contract is 12, there's only $1 million in dead money. So that would put them, if they do that, that'll put them at $35 million. So they're still quite a bit behind the Vikings in cap space.
Okay.
So they're looking at, like you said, I think their more realistic chance is Case Keenum at, at 20 million. So,
Right.
that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah.
But
that makes a lot more sense when I think about it.
yeah, so I mean, really, I think it comes down to, the Vikings and the Jets are really the only two realistic players for Cousins at this point.
Yeah, so it's just going to be, does he want to make money or does he want to win games?
Yeah, that's what it boils down to. And, this, like we said, this is going to have a domino effect on the rest of free agency, and of course that has another domino effect on the draft. So, we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, I guess next time we do a podcast, I think we'll be after the start of free agency, and we'll see where the Vikings are going to be headed into the draft. So at that point, we'll know who the quarterback is.
Yeah, well, I think that'd be interesting.
So, all right, Ronnie.
That'll be interesting to finally know that. So.
Yep. Well, Ronnie, thanks so much for coming on today and helping me. Yep, no problem. And thank you, everyone else, for tuning in to another edition of Viking Spin. And we'll catch you next time. Take care.